So there's an acrylic pattern for the clicker to use to cut around, make the shape, and then also what we call a stitch marking pattern. Okay, so these are basically a stencil, and lines will get directly drawn onto the surface of the leather to give an indication of something. It could be where two pieces need to fit together, it could be where a row of stitching ends, or where a detail of stitching goes. Okay, now again, as you will see, our shoes are all handmade, but of course our customers expect that they are perfect pairs. So again, many other companies will work with basically what they call tolerances. So they will say, when you fit one piece on top of this one, it needs to be 10 millimeters from the edge. But actually, if it's 8, if it's 12, for them it's acceptable quality. It's a near enough a pair. But for us, we have to be much more precise and defined. So we will give these visual indication lines just to control quality. Okay. Already you can see there's sort of various pens that we have to use with a variety of different leathers to ensure that it causes no permanent mark or damage to the surface of the leather. So even something as simple as drawing a line on a piece of leather isn't just, a lot of thought's gone behind it about the type of inks and things that you can use. Okay. So the leather, just below the surface, you can see all the natural raw layers of that leather underneath. Okay, if any of that is going to be visible on the finished shoe, someone just here will painstakingly paint all those raw edges to make it beautifully uniform, and then the customer never knows the leather wasn't completely dyed through, which you can't get with a beautiful red finish. So that will then look like see, all the raw layers on the edge, and then after painting, just made uniform. And someone very painstakingly sits here with a paintbrush, minute, painting that. And of course the dyes that we use are permanent, so if anybody accidentally goes over the top, the piece is ruined, has to be thrown away, and a new piece replaced. So very detailed, accurate work. And little attentions to detail. Right, then on to an operation which we call skiving, which, as you may or may not know, generally in the world means to skive means to be lazy, but unfortunately not for these people. So skiving in this term is taking the leather, and where we have it at its full thickness, if we're going to sandwich one piece on top of another, to stop there being the full thickness step as you go around the shoe, we reduce that edge in a controlled way to make the lines of the shoe much more fluid. So we've taken it from full thickness, and as you can see then, shaved down in a controlled way, white wine. So this will sit on top of another piece.
Oh right, okay.
And so there's not a step as it goes around. It will now fit beautifully flush and almost look like an invisible joint.
And that's shaving it, is it?
And that's it, yeah. So basically in the machine, there's a little knife revolving. As you pass a piece of leather over the knife, it shaves away. You can control the width and depth of that.
Do you ever get cramp? Backache. You need to get one of those standing desks.
I heard they're all the rage.
Or one of those balloons. So you know the balloon things that you sit on? Those are apparently good for the back because they make you bounce around on your balloon.
Taking the leather from its flat form and introducing to it the curvature that we need to respect the shape of the foot.
Is blocking.
Blocking. So if you imagine down and down over your foot. Okay. If we wanted to force this piece of leather into that shape, as you can see, the natural structure of it is resisting. Okay, so what we're going to do in the gentlest way is introduce this curvature that we need without causing any stress and damage. So what we do is with a combination of heat and pressure, almost iron, if you imagine, that shaping, so we train it and give it memory. Okay? Right. Without that, by forcing it over your last, you'll create many creases.
Yeah.
This one as we speak. See, so the lining of the leather.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And now, because we've trained it into the shape, it will remember this curvature that we've created. And it's been done in a way that causes no undue stress to the fibre makeup of the leather. And with the quality.
Do you have to sort of recalibrate the machine for every piece?
Absolutely.
And is it different for every shoe?
Can be.
Yeah.
Can be, yeah. So obviously if you're making, this is an apron piece, so it's probably going into a loafer.
Right.
This shape will generally be of consistency.
Okay.
Certainly go into boots or Oxfords or something else.
Yeah.
You're going to need to recalibrate. Different timings, different heats.
Wow.
Will go into it. Okay guys, let's head this way.
Right.
Before the sole and the heels assembled.
It's the what? It's called the what?
Upper.
Oh yeah, the upper. Yeah.
Okay. So.
And closing means what?
Closing.
Does that mean stitching together?
Basically.
Yeah.
Basically now. So taking the individual pieces, stitching them together.
Okay.
Creating this.
Is this now closed?
Closed. Exactly. Natural. Right, so again, how we do this at John Lobb, it's a little bit unique in the world. In as much, what we have, as you'll see as we go through the room, if they're still here, is that we have basically teams of 2 ladies who work together exclusively and complete all the tasks with assembling the upper. Okay. Again, if you go to many other factories, what you'll find is there'll be a team of maybe 20 to 30 people, depending on the scale of it. But basically, each person is kind of a specialist in doing 1 or 2 processes. So they do that process, they hand it to someone else, they do a couple of processes, they hand it to someone else, and it snakes through that team until you arrive at your finished upper.
Which is this is finished.
And that's finished, yeah. Okay. Now, if you're doing lots of high runs, high volumes of shoes, that's actually a very efficient way to work because people are doing the same thing over and over and over again.
And this is this an Ashley?
It is.
That shoe is
Actually,
called
as
an
a
Ashley.
model. Yeah.
And then is this going to be turned into a shoe?
This isn't. I'll explain why.
I was going to say, like, can you find a little like handwritten Ashley if you take your shoe apart? That would be quite cute, though, wouldn't it? Or if it was the name of the person who did it.
Exactly. We could do lots of fun things.
Yeah.
But the only downside with having, of having, this big team all doing a few processes is that actually if the person at the beginning or the first few processes makes a mistake, you could actually travel through a member, 5 or 6 people before that mistake's realised. At which stage, if you're lucky, and I'm not lucky as a person, and I'm not, we're not lucky as a company really, you would just be able to undo what's wrong and correct it.
Okay. Yeah.
But of course that never happens. So
No.
actually what you need to do is replace the faulty parts,
Right.
which means you need to return back to the original skin,
gosh.
try and find the original skin because of course each skin has slight tonal variances.
Sure.
So you can't just cut a new piece from another skin. It has to be the original one. Process it all the way back through prep, get it back to here and hopefully make it right the second time round.
Gosh.
The biggest implication of that, you think is time and money, but actually no, they are things, but the biggest concern for me would be the delay to our customers.
Okay.
Okay, that's number one. So, how we do it differently, we have these teams of 2, and by them having complete control over all of those processes, changes your whole mindset towards quality. Because of course, you're not dependent on 30 people getting the job right, you can only be judged on your own work.
Right.
And it does genuinely make a difference.
Amazing.
I don't sort of like condone it, but generally what we tend to have a little bit is that our teams are just a little bit competitive. They all want to be the best. Of course, they know their shoes are going out into the world. They're seen as the best in the world. What a sense of pride. And they all like to be the best. Great for our customers.
Yeah, for sure.
So, to manage this, we do 2 things. Make sure we get quality weight. So, that Ashley that we were just looking at is what we would call, turn it over, a closing sample. Okay?
Right, okay.
So for these teams, what I do is I give them 2 tools to use to ensure that their workmanship is exactly how it needs to be. So they have this. So for every style we've ever created, we have one of these. For them to come and collect, and they can see exactly, okay, I need to do this like this, it needs to look like that. But of course this only tells you part of the story, because it tells you how it should look at the end. It doesn't tell you how to get there.
Right.
Okay, so we create what we call a closing routine. So it's almost the step-by-step guide of how you do it, the sequence of how things are done. If you ever buy flat pack furniture, those dreadful things, you get the instruction book, you do page 1, you do page 2. It's exactly that. Okay. When I took on, obviously I've been in here a very long time, and actually I'll show you the job I started on. It's the most simple task in the factory. I took my chances and I worked my way through it. When I took over managing quality about 15 years ago, this room would always be in my top 3 for errors and mistakes. And not because people weren't passionate, they didn't care. It's literally they didn't have these kinds of tools around them. And we have in our core collection about 30 to 40 models. Each one of them goes together in a unique way. You don't have generics. You can't say, well, if you can do that one, you can do that one, that one, and that one. Right? They're all individuals. So to be able to remember maybe 30 steps for 30 to 40 models, we're already adding up the numbers. That would be a miracle in itself. But then, of course, we offer seasonal collections, so we'll introduce 6 to 8 new styles, spring, summer, autumn, winter, which, of course, they've never worked on because it's a new introduction, so they've got to learn those. But then, just to make it even a little bit more complicated, being John Lobb, if a customer has ever owned a pair of John Lobb shoes, maybe it was a model that was a seasonal collection 20 years ago, if they walk back into one of our stores today and say, look, I've worn it to death, it's had it, it won't be repaired anymore, I want another pair, just the same. Can you do it? Of course we say, yes, of course you can. So maybe, they'd be working on a style today that they've never even seen in their life and would never have an opportunity. So these tools, very simple and logical when you think about it, but took this department from top 3 to bottom 3 consistently for the last 12 years.
Nice.
So, simple tools, but very, very, very effective. And then add that little bit of competitiveness. We're winning all
Formula.
Nice.
Right, so let's have a quick look. Is Mary, as you can see on the far side, and Mary's role is to assemble the pieces together with what we call the tacky glue. Tacky glue, of course, because if you're not happy with exactly how it positions, you can lift it and reposition it before it becomes permanent. Okay? But when she's happy with how the pieces are fitted together, she passes it to her partner, who's Viv, as you can see here. And Viv will now commit those pieces together by stitching through the leather, locking it together permanently.
Fitter.
Machinist. Very simple.
And what happens here?
So her partner's just off doing something else, so the same relationship. So we've got a partner, a fitter here, and then Rosie, who's the machinist in the team.
Hello, Rosie.
Cool. Now, again, John Lobb, lots of little hidden details what make us as special as we are. One, for example, is when we do a row of stitching. Says what I'm playing. Right. We don't grab enough. So one of those kind of little hidden details. Okay. When we do a row stitching, okay, we specify there must be 12 stitches to an inch. So no matter where you go around this shoe, if you were to take a tape measure, hold it against it, you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The reason for that is if it was more than 12 stitches, well, actually that needle will perforate the leather too many times, make it weak. There's a risk it can tear then in wear. Actually, if it's more than 12 or less than 12 stitches, actually they start to look a bit big, a bit ugly, and they lose that whole refined look to the shoe. Now, of course, many customers, they're just buying a beautiful shoe, they're not going to be even interested in if there's 12 stitches to it. But it is the most perfect stitch length you can do. And one of the things we do is make sure, no matter how you're doing the stitching, it always matches up to that requirement. Okay. Sounds easy enough, but actually when you're sewing through different layers, so actually you've got this piece sitting on top of this piece, as you go over that section, because there's extra thickness, it's going to
Slows
cause
down,
more
yeah.
tension
Right.
exactly on the thread, which means the stitches will become finer.
So you have
need
to
to
push
make
a
a
bit harder.
slight adjustment to the machine to make sure that you maintain committed. John Lobb lasting bank. So here, once the closing is complete, we've got our uppers, we've got a little holding area where it's probably our last opportunity to reconsider our plan. So it could be because we make many individual pairs, one of our stores will call us up and say, well actually, Mr. So-and-so is actually going to an event a week earlier. Is there any opportunity for you to make his shoes a little bit quicker? Once they leave this area, really there's no opportunity to make things any quicker. So it's our last chance just to look at our priorities and just see if we can help any of our stores and our customers in that respect. So lasting bank, because as you can see just behind me is the bank of last, so all the different shapes, sizes and width fittings that we'll use to make our shoes.
These are all different sizes?
Yep, so they're all different styles. So these are now pairs that are waiting to be produced as in upper form. So the closing is complete and we've got all the pairs of uppers.
And then their corresponding soles.
Exactly. Well, the insole.
Insole. Got it. Okay.
So how we make our shoes is a construction technique called Goodyear welted. I don't know if it means anything to you, but you'll know all about it in the short while. And basically what it means is that when we make our shoes, basically we're going to stitch everything together. Okay, when you make shoes, many options. The easiest way to make a pair of shoes, take an insole, attach it to your last, if you imagine that's the right way around, stretch your upper over your last and glue that upper directly to the insole, so the underneath. When it's dried and set, you take a sole of any description you like, stick that to the lasted upper, hey presto, you've got a pair of shoes. The only problem is with any adhesive bonding, you rely exclusively on glue to make those shoes. No glues are permanent. Over a period of time, they will always delaminate, fracture, and come apart. And for those shoes, when that happens, sorry, we'll just throw them away. There's no way of sort of correcting that or repairing it. By stitching everything together, what it means is when you wear out your sole and your heel, you have the ability to undo the stitching that's locking it all together and replace the worn out parts. So the general rule is, as long as the customer looks after his upper, everything else we can keep replacing and making his shoe like a brand new one again.
Right.
Okay. So that's one
So
big.
then you stretch it over, glue it, and then sew it?
No.
There's no glue?
I'm going to show you. Okay. So onto our insole, to allow us to do this process, we create what we call a rib. Okay. So this man-made material, made of cloth, as you can see, is wrapped over a core of leather. You see, just between the two. Okay. And it's this that we will stitch our upper to.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay. And you'll see it in the process downstairs. Oh, and that was
alive too.
Yeah, everything's alive today. Must have known you were coming. So the big advantage is obviously by stitching everything together, it's much stronger. You don't run the risk of worrying that your shoes over a period of time are going to come apart. The other big advantage is, of course, when you wear out your sole and heel, you can have your shoes repaired. And generally, you know, before it gives us any sort of trouble, we can usually replace the soles and heels at least sort of 5 to 6 times. So you should get, you know, even if someone's quite heavily wearing shoes, a couple of years from a pair of sole and heels. So do the maths, you know, 10 to 12 years out of the first sort of resoling program. Then generally what you'll have done is perforate the insole rib a few too many times. So actually what we'll then do is strip the upper off, replace the insole, and then we begin that whole process again. So it really does get into sort of a lifetime of wear.
Gosh, what does an upper look like after a lifetime of wear?
I can show you.
It might look quite cool, right?
You know?
Yeah.
Do you know, I mean, a big part of our business is customers returning their shoes to have this repairing, resoling process done. You know, I saw a pair of shoes not so long ago. We knew by the production number it was about 20 years old.
Gosh.
Do you know what? It looked like he'd worn it once or twice.
Really?
He cared for his shoes so passionately. Yeah, I've seen a pair of shoes come back within 12 months, and you know, honestly, you'd have thrown them away. But of course, people they want to get a value. So. So, you know, as much as we are in Northampton what we call the ready-to-wear shoemaker, part of John Lobb, we want to be as close to bespoke as possible. So to allow us to sort of, bespoke means basically your foot's going to be measured and we will produce a last exactly on the measurements of your foot. As I say, to be as close as possible, what we have in all our ranges is lasts that go from a 5 to 12 for the men's collection with half size increments. So as you go from a half size to a half size, you're extending the length by 4 mil. You know, it's fractional, but by doing that, it means you're going to find something very, very close to each personal customer's foot. Okay. Then, to make life a little more interesting again, we also introduce 4 width fittings. So generally speaking, an E-fit, as you can see on this last denoted by an E, generally serves the European market very, very well. Okay. As we as a business expanded and we went out into Japan, we found Japanese fits a little more slimmer. So we introduced the D-fitting last just to serve that kind of market. Then again, during the growth period, we went out to America and into sort of Russia area, and actually their feet are a little bit wider because, of course, everything is bigger and better in America. Of course, you know, we all know this. So, so we introduced the double E, and actually that serves very, very well. And then the final sort of piece of that, we found, well, I don't know, about roughly 5 years ago, we started getting some phone calls from America saying we need something even wider. You know, what's happening? So strange. When we investigated a little bit deeper, well, what it was, as China starts to make its money, of course, Chinese people that have money have nothing to spend their money on in China because things are not great. So actually, they're travelling around the world to spend their wealth, and actually, they were going to America buying luxury goods such as luxury shoes. And Chinese feet are very flat and very wide.
Really?
So we introduced the triple E last to serve that market.
Chinese feet are the widest. Interesting.
Who'd have thought?
I know. I would have thought it was the narrow like the Japanese.
Yeah, you'd think Asia, but
yeah, you would.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Interesting.
Okay.
All
So
right.
lots of lasts.
Lots of lasts.
Please arrive again in the lift shaft over in that corner into this next production stage, which we call lasting. So now this team are going to take the uppers, stretch them over the last form to give us our length, shape and look of shoe.
Okay.
So very first thing that we do into our upper is sandwich a man-made material called a toe puff.
A toe path, you say?
Toe puff, yeah.
Toe path.
Yeah.
P-U-F-F.
Yep. Okay. So gets adhesed in between the upper and the lining of the shoe in the side.
Oh, yeah.
And the purpose of this is to give rigidity over the toe section. Okay, obviously our leathers are very, very soft. If you made a shoe straight with it as well, that will just collapse and fall in. So as you can feel, got a nice bit of sort of reinforcement for that section of the shoe. So it gets laminated into there, and then what happens is when you heat this thing up, it becomes nice and soft and malleable, and then you can shape it exactly as you want, and when it cools, it will stay exactly in that form. Okay, so toe puff first. Then into the back of the shoe, stiffener. Okay, and the stiffener looks like. Okay, that. So this is full leather. Okay, and again that will get placed between
That feels weird.
the lining and the outside of the shoe at the back. As you can feel, we wet it up. When it's wet,
Oh, that's
it goes
why.
nice and soft and pliable. But when it dries, it's absolutely rock hard and gives that reinforcement. Of course, men generally are terrible to shoes. So in the morning, the shoe's on the floor.
Yeah, just slide them in, yeah.
You know, squash your foot in there. You
Yeah.
will very, very quickly break down this at the back of the
Sure.
shoe. So that will give that strength and reinforcement around the back.
Right.
Okay? So that gets sandwiched into there. Which will then here. Okay. So then using these two machines, what we will do then is stretch the upper down and onto the last.
You're going to win it.
Okay. And we start to see the overall shape that we're trying to achieve. Okay. What the machines will do, they will, you're asking the questions, you glue it. It will inject some hot melt glue around the edge of that rib wall.
Okay.
and basically squeeze the leather onto that hot glue, hold it in place till it cools, and then we have that profile that we're looking for.
Right.
But of course, we're actually going to stitch all of this together, so this is just a temporary hold.
And what is it? Staple?
Yeah. So once we've held the upper at the toe, we have this loose leather to deal with then at the
Yeah.
sides. For every one of our shoes, we then hand stretch that leather exactly onto the last. When we've held it in place, we'll then hold it with some staples again in preparation for the
For the
sewing.
stitching. Gosh.
Exactly. Okay. Now we can see the overall shape's been created. So held at the toe, some staples holding it in place at the side, ready for the stitching, and the final part, the seat, is held in place with some nails, and they'll stay there permanently.
Right.
Okay, so
Hobnails.
yeah,
Are they called hobnails?
yeah. Okay, so we'll start to see